Our second lecture considered the distorted ways we understand cultivation and maturity, bound to whiteness. Whiteness is both a way of being seen and a way of seeing in this world. And the distortions, those distortions that grew out of the way we see the world through a hermeneutics of possession. Indeed, nationalism comes to life. Nationalism comes to life inside the possessive logics of land. Without land, nationalism as we now understand it would not exist. The central struggle that defines modernity and the history of so many nations is the struggle over land. Who owns it and who controls it? And all of us, it does not matter where we're from, all of us have been formed in nationalist ways of looking at the world. But the most decisive aspect of our training, the most decisive aspect of our training in the hermeneutics of possession has been the way we have learned to live the line. So this evening I want to talk about the line, the line. One of the first acts creatures do to communicate, to connect, or to construct anything is to draw a line. So much of our communicative reality, how, why, and to whom we communicate is formed by the line. So much of how we understand and construct reality, geographic, spatial, architectural, and emotional, depends on how we draw lines. And so much of how we imagine connection, recognition, accountability depends on how we imagine the lines that run through us, the lines that separate us, and the lines that connect us to others. Lines are basic and crucial for living life. And my friends, we've come to the point in our world where we have no choice but to think the line afresh, because we have been taught to draw the line, live the line, and think the line in ways that are destroying us. As Reviel Netz, N-E-T-Z, notes in his marvelous book, A History of Barbed Wire, which I would recommend to you all, A History of Barbed Wire, he notes that our world is formed by means of the line. In that beautiful book in which he talks about the destructive reality of barbed wire, which is incredibly important, he said the following: a closed line was made in order to prevent motion from outside the line to its inside. And from that closed line, we derive the idea of property. With the same line, we prevented motion from inside the line to the outside, and we derived the idea of the prison. And then, with an open line, we prevented the motion in either direction, and from it, we derived the idea of the border. Property, prison, border. Property, prison, border. It is through the prevention of motion that space enters history. That's worth remembering. Space has entered history fundamentally distorted, and we must think the line in order to grasp that distortion. Lines are everywhere. We know them in so many ways. They guide the fabricated distinctions between nation states who all share a common earth. As the celebrated botanist Peter Raven has said, that this planet and all biological life can no longer afford a world shaped by the selfishness, greed, and narcissism of nation states, each trying to secure the well-being of only their own people in utter disregard of the ecosystems that sustain us all. You see, nationalism was a new way to reassemble life with land. Nationalism was never life inside the land, never life listened in serious reciprocity with plant and animal, sky and season, dirt and water, listening, learning, and finding a way to know oneself as deep partner in a world through a particular place. That was not nationalism. Nationalism is ownership. Property ownership made plural and made the universal right of a people to their space. The universal right of a people to their space. Yes, there was attachment to land. Yes, there was blood bound to soil. And yes, there was deep sentiment and sensibilities born of living in a land, but this is different. This is owning the land, not being owned by the land. This is speaking for the land as one who controls it, not having land and animal speak through you, as though you extend their lives through your life. You see, nationalism places people inside borders and borders inside people. Place-centered identity is very different. It removes the borders between people and the actual world and points to the artificiality of all borders. Yet few people today see the artificiality of borders because of the profound operation of the line. Lines create the illusion that separation exists where it actually does not. Lines also guide the racial and geographic segregation that shapes life in the West, especially in this country. Lines facilitate our racial animus and the deep structural, spatial, and spiritual divides that animate this country. So my fundamental point this evening is that a Christian doctrine of creation should guide us in how to draw lines that do two things. First, in how to sense our connectivity in and with the world. And secondly, how to form alliances, social, cultural, political, economic, and emotional, that are deep, abiding, and surprising for the sake of the life of Jesus. We who believe in a God who became flesh in Jesus Christ must learn to think the line redemptively. We must learn to think the line redemptively. That is, to show what Christians drawing lines should look like and do in the world. But in order to think the line redemptively, we must first look at how we Christians thought and performed the line in distortion, creating distortion. The causes, bless you, the causes of the distortion brings us back to the colonial settlers and their ground-breaking and ground-forming actions. Specifically, the work of three crucial actors that are absolutely crucial to the world we inhabit now. They were the merchant, the missionary, and the soldier. The merchant, the missionary, and the soldier. Together, they form the world we now inhabit, and together they taught us how to live the lie. There is an idea in Trinitarian thought called perichoresis, the mutual indwelling of the Father, Son, and Spirit. That the Father, Son, and Spirit's, their operation are without division. The same is true of these three crucial agents. The merchant, the missionary, and the servant and the soldier work profoundly together, mutually shaping each other. What did they do together? Many things, but what we're going to focus on tonight is just one thing. Together, merchant, missionary, and soldier reordered our sense of land, animal, plant, earth, and body through forming life into abiding enclosure. That's the word to hold on to. Enclosure. Enclosure is the word that we must keep in mind because it speaks of everything done by this unholy Trinity. They enclosed the land by forming private property, and they enclosed the body, forming racial identity. They came to the new world separating people from land, separating identity from place, separating connectivity from relationality, and turning the world and its multiple beautiful peoples, turning the land and its multiple beautiful forms of life, all into commodity form. They turned the world into possession in an absolute sense. They not only made the world and its people sellable, but they taught us to see the world in fragmentation and enclosure. Missionary, soldier, and merchant together offered us a twofold vision of existence through property and race that has been almost impossible for us to sense our boundedness to other creatures and the earth itself. They gave us the new form of possessive logic. People the world over have always had a sense of themselves, as belonging to particular lands. And through this way of belonging, articulating in multiple ways their claims to place. Yet these claims to place are different from our claims to place. These claims to place were permeable while boundaried, movable within nomadic logics while stable, and identity constituting while being expandable to those who would also choose to inhabit the land of these people. As the anthropologist Calvin Luther Martin once said, that's a great name for an anthropologist. As Calvin Luther Martin said, the historian anthropologist, for so many indigenous peoples, when you stepped onto what was their land, you were stepping onto their skin. The land was not theirs to own. The land owned them. So if you came on their land and you chose to live on their land, you were saying that you chose to be one of them, be with them. Expandable identity based on place. There could, obviously, let's be clear, there could and would be land and animal seizure as one people group sought to expand its territory and its claim to waterways or hunting and planting grounds and so forth. Fights and wars over land were not invented by the merchants, missionaries, and soldiers. There would also be identity difference as people narrated their stories in distinction from the stories of other peoples and registered their differences through their practices in the land and with animals who constituted permanent familial relations. The three agents, however, in their collective creative genius transform the old into the new by guiding the world in new ways of drawing lines and circles. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Lines and circles both outside the body and upon the body. The production of lines to separate spaces that were in fact not separate took on a new economic determination as the privatization of land and places sliced through forms of identity, both spatial and human. The North American grid system, inspired by the thinking of Thomas Jefferson and executed through the Land Ordinance of 1785, exemplified a way of thinking that would form the normal in us. How many of you know what the North American grid system is? One hand, two hands. So, any of you ever been in a plane and got the window seat and you couldn't get out? And so you were forced to look out of the window and you were flying over, Michigan or Nebraska or Illinois or North Carolina or South Carolina or Georgia or Virginia or California, and you looked out the window and you noticed that the landscape was shaped by these big blocks, big square blocks. And wherever you go, whether it was Virginia, you looked out the window, or you were in California, you looked out the window, or you were going over to Nebraska, you saw these big square blocks. That's the North American grid system. None of those blocks are natural. None of those blocks are natural. They were all created. Lines were drawn across the lands of indigenous peoples. Lines that were both theoretical, material, and economic. Lines cutting through space and time, flesh and bone, bear and tree, fish and bird, lines slicing through the living and the dead. Grounds and homes, hopes and dreams, rivers and streams, lines that knew no history, respected no story, understood no rhythm of song or life, lines that gestured eternality. What was being made by the line may not be unmade. You see, the North American grid system, it could care less if it was a sacred, hallowed ground of a people. They could care less. They just drew a line right through it. They could care less if there was a river there. If this is where the animals came every year. They could care less. They just drew a line right through it. And if you put your body in the way, they moved your body out of the way. Yeah. You see, the line was the womb of modern private property. And that line, it normalized normalized connection and disconnection inside and outside. Yet the line outside the body was also the line within the body, as we were habituated to see the line that was in fact not there. And who internalized the line? We internalized the line as a boundary of existence. You see, the line determined what was and was not mine, and therefore what was and was not my concern. Not mine, not my concern. The line determined what was and was not connected to me, and therefore what demanded both moral obligation and action from me. You see, concern and moral obligation have always, long before the three agents, been limited by and directed through people groups or royal edict. But the three agents, by means of the line, turned that limitation and direction into a spatial absurdity by removing or creating new forms of moral obligation based on property ownership. The line determined what you were responsible for and what was none of your business. The line could and would separate worlds by inches. And we have been taught that our moral obligations and ethical responsibilities to know and to love, to share what we have, ends at the line. Only an extraordinary act presses us over the line of property, of prison, of border. And that extraordinary act, we have been habituated to feel as an abnormal act, a strange and fearful act. You stepped over the border, you're not safe anymore. What are you talking about? The same dirt there is right here. No, it's not. It's not the same dirt. Yes, it is. No, it's not. This is this nation's soil. That's another nation's soil. Yet the most powerful work of the line formed in the hands of those agents was the way they used the line to shape our vision of need. You see, merchants arrived to the New World seeking to control the how and the why people are joined in the process of caring for their everyday needs. Let me just say one thing about these three. You know that in the history of Christianity, so much bad and good has been at the hands of missionaries. But the one thing we must always honor, whether good or bad, is the courage of someone to be a missionary. To go to a place and to be with a people not your own. Missionaries showed courage. But here's what you must understand. Beside the courage of the missionary has always been the courage of the merchant. Merchants have shown just as much courage and fearlessness as missionaries. They have gone anywhere on this planet for the possibility of profit. And right alongside the courage of the missionary and the courage of the merchant has been the courage of the soldier. our world is shaped by the courage of those three agents. And in many places that we would even call remote in our minds to this moment, what you will find are merchants, missionaries, and soldiers. To this moment, they have shaped our world. And to not understand that is to not understand who we are. Merchants arrived to the New World seeking to control the how and why people are joined in the process of caring for their everyday needs. The merchant wanted to control how we saw and sought to address our needs. The merchant did not want a communal determination, reorientation, and articulation of needs outside his control. That is, outside the control of the market. So the merchant drew a line brilliantly, consistently, unrelentingly. The merchant drew a line between our needs, placing our thinking about what we need inside our thinking the line. The new thing was the fracturing of human need. The needs of a community could now be sliced up into individual needs, each of which could be interpreted and intercepted by the merchant and the market. Equally important, the merchant enabled the parallel pursuit of interest by communities and peoples so that people's imaginations followed that parallelism. In short, the merchant disrupted the possibility of imagining needs together, shared, mutual, interpenetrating, and community-constituting needs. The way of the merchant is to imagine needs in fragmentation, needs in fragmented and fragmenting ways, reaching all the way into the inner discernment of needs. I need for you to see what you need individually. I need for you to look in the mirror alone and see what you need. I can't afford to have you thinking with other people about what you need and possibly working together to meet your needs. If there would be communities within the merchant way of imagining need, each community would be guided to think like an individual caring for her needs. The merchant's operation concealed the deepest truth. We are all creatures in need. The merchant's operations concealed what we know. We are all creatures in need, and we are bound together in those needs. The merchant's way demands the line that blocks connecting people precisely inside of and through human need across multiple boundaries. Yet with the merchant, others come to exist in primarily one of two ways when it comes to need. Either they help us fulfill our needs by being our customers or consumers, or they exist as our enemies and competitors in the pursuit of what we need. The soldier followed the work of the merchant, always. The soldier always follows the work of the merchant. By clearing the way for us to meet our needs, the soldier bound our sight to the line, disciplining our attention by means of the line, and in so doing, helping to conform us to the merchant's vision of others. Again, the line has created an absurdity. Needs that are joined, needs that are in fact one, must be separated because the soldier teaches us when it comes to meeting our needs, we are at war. The mode of the soldier invites us to perform what the merchant desires. And the missionary, lodged between the merchant and the soldier, found herself torn between a calling and the limitation of the line. You see, colonial missionaries, they may have heard the call of God to go into the world, but they found themselves localized, sequestered, and asked to be the high priest of particular people who have claimed particular lands for themselves. Church after church in the New World separated a gospel work with native conversion and subjugation on the one side, and on the other side, caring for the pastoral needs of white colonial settlers, white colonial citizens. The direction of ministerial work followed the trajectory of the line, and a pastoral imagination formed that could not discern or lacked the courage to connect ecologies of human need. We were all bequeathed a pastoral imagination, an ecclesial practice that rarely, if ever, sought the joining of human need. Native, European, African, and immigrant. Rather, like the merchant and the soldier, the missionary normalized a segregation of need made natural by the line. The line here, my sisters and brothers, is not primarily a metaphor. It is real. And it is also imagined. It is inside of us, helping to constitute our subjectivity, our way of negotiating the world, and it is outside of our bodies, guiding our vision and our actions. We live the line. From our properties to our prisons to our borders, moving from our interstates to our external limitations, and we are both subject to its power and we empower the line to guide us. My point, not to be missed, is that in order to do gospel work today, we must address the line. And we must address the line in two crucial ways. First, you know I was going to say this. You know what I'm going to say. We have to remove the line. We have to remove the line. Then, the second thing, we must map new lines. Of course, I was someplace recently and I said this, and someone said to me, Dr. Jennings, this sounds like you're recommending pure anarchy. And for some people, what I'm saying does sound like pure anarchy, because too many people accept the line as the inevitable and necessary structuring reality of social, political, geographic, and economic life. And in fact, there are many people who you know who benefit from exactly how we draw lines, shaped in the Trinitarian pedagogy of the missionary, the merchant, and the soldier. But for Christians, we believe in the triune God who has created all that is, and we understand the line. We understand the line differently. In the first Matrix movie of the famed trilogy, which you all, I'm sure, have committed to memory. In the first Matrix movie, Neo, the central character, Neo, goes to meet the Oracle, this wonderful black woman who's the Oracle. And while he was waiting to meet the oracle, he encounters a small child sitting on the floor, bending spoons with its mind. Neil picks up one of the spoons, and the child says to him, "Of course, the key is to realize that there is no spoon." I love that line. There is no spoon. The key is to realize that there is no line. One creator, one world, one love that binds all that is to God. In becoming human and living at the side of the creature, God has claimed the entire creation in desire and hope. God's claim on us, realized in Jesus Christ, is the basis of the great transgressing. God is the great transgressor. God transgresses the line and calls us to do the same. God transgresses the lines that we have constructed even in the name of God. Even in the name of God. So I am proposing a geographic anarchy through the transgression of the line. You see, we Gentiles are Christians because God demanded that Peter and Cornelius transgress the line. Our life of discipleship has always been about line crossing in order to map new lines. Remember the words of Peter there with Cornelius. "You know I am not supposed to be here." His first words, "You know I'm not supposed to be here." And in many ways, when you read that story, you realize that Peter wasn't really talking to Cornelius when he said that. He was really talking to God. "You know I'm not supposed to be here." He had started asking that question on the roof. And so he then says to Cornelius, "Why am I here? Why am I here?" And Cornelius is like, "I don't know." A line has been transgressed. And because of it, you come to be. You see, you would not be if the line had not been transgressed. So our discipleship is about transgressing lines in order to map new ones. The anthropologist Keith Basso said that most of us in the Western world are geographically adrift with no deep sense of place. We live almost always above the ground, rarely touching the earth and sensing our connectivity with the world, as I said to you earlier. What stabilizes us geographically is not the ground, not the earth, and certainly not plant or animal, but the line, the property line. The property line stabilizes our world, the line separating us from the incarcerated and separating some neighborhoods from neighborhoods that are already incarcerated spaces. And the line that constitutes borders. These lines that have come to be configured for us are also in us, shaping our moral and theological imaginations, guiding our interior life and identities. The lines, as they are now configured in us, block a deep sense of connectivity to the land and animals, especially to each other. Such real connectivity, sisters and brothers, is crucial for us as Christians to do the gospel work of joining people in love, care, and hope. Mapping new lines, then, is the way we transgress the death-forming work of the line as it now exists for us. You see, new lines are about creating new alliances, new life-generating alliances. The point not to be missed here, as I'm coming to a close, I want to make sure you get the point. We must think alliances geographically first before we think them in other important ways. Place matters to God, and the line that separates us must give way to the line that connects us. Too often we Christians think alliances economically, politically, socially, denominationally, culturally, and in other ways, and we bypass the most crucial starting point, the ground, the building, the neighborhood, the subdivision, the community, the city, east, west, north, south, roads, the back streets, the alleys, the sidewalks, the highways, the parking lots, parks, gardens. The alliance must be geographically mapped first. The anthropologist Tim Ingold, in his marvelous work entitled Lines, offers us a taxonomy of lines. He places lines in two general categories. There are threads, I love this, there are threads and there are traces. Threads and traces. He says that not all lines fall into these two categories, but most do. Threads, sisters and brothers, threads are lines that you make and map in space, not touching surfaces. And traces are lines that you make and map on top of surfaces or into surfaces. I want you to think about lines that we must make and map as Christians in order to do gospel work today in terms of threads and traces. Let's think, in my time remaining, let's think of one kind of trace and one kind of thread. There can be many more, but I only want to suggestively outline two lines. Tracing a new economic geography. Tracing a new economic geography. In response to a pledge made to Jesus by a scribe who said he would follow him wherever he goes, Jesus uttered those famous words that you all know so well. Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Matthew 8:19 and 20. Rather than imagine this as a signature of the homelessness of Jesus or his lack of property ownership, I want to think about this in relation to the demand to follow him, the demand of discipleship in the face of house and home. Brian J. McCabe, in his book, No Place Like Home, Wealth, Community, and the Politics of Home Ownership, notes that home ownership has become one of the primary ways to indoctrinate people into maintaining and supporting the status quo, acquiescing to the deep capitalist logics and resisting systemic social change that would involve the operations of real estate through the reformation of neighborhoods and communities. You see, McCabe, he's captured a crucial point in his book that Christians need to take very seriously. The joy and good of having a home is now captured inside the horrors of the line and the way the line teaches us to accept the geographic status quo. We must find ways to map new lines across property divides that are the physical and material causes of segregation, gender, racial, cultural, and class. We need to get real estate companies, city planners, community organizers and activists, homeless people, and others together to rethink the home. We need to rethink the home. Maybe we can cut into the surfaces of spaces new patterns of living. If that seems unrealistic, too idealistic or utopian, then maybe we can create a crack or a cut or a crease where real estate logics and the desires of planners have created yet another hard line that divides the haves from the have-nots, and then configured policing practices to reinforce that divide. Because all policing follows the way of the soldier. All policing follows the line. The majority of black bodies killed by law enforcement were because those bodies were someplace they were not supposed to be. Policing practice always follows city planning policy. Always. The fight is over the policies, over what houses we put where. I'm jumping ahead, I'll get to that tomorrow morning. But what if we conceived the home and neighborhood as transgressing space that joined people together, normally divided by outcome, by income and outlook, by race and class, by gender and family structure? Threading a new line of connection through need is what we must do. You see, the merchant placed himself right where Jesus wanted to be. There between us and our needs, there between the needs of others, joining people together in their need through himself and the market. We know that this is the place Jesus wanted because he offered us his body precisely at the place of our need. Jesus did not shame us in our hungers, in our need to consume, but he turned that need toward his own life. He joins us together at our deepest needs, and he desires to join us together in the meeting of our needs. We must remember, I mentioned to you earlier that story of Peter and Cornelius, but we must remember that the story began with God coming to Peter at the height of his hunger. He was waiting for food to be served, and then the sheet was lowered at the height of his hunger. And what was on that sheet? Us. Us, at the height of his hunger. Jesus has placed his body at the center of our needs. He joins us together. He joins us together in our needs. He did not shame us in our hungers, in our need to consume, but he turned that need to his own life. He joins us together in our deepest needs, and he desires to join us together in the meeting of our needs. But it is at the meeting of our needs that the power of the line is often most powerful, forming in us a blindness to the most obvious realities of shared struggle, shared desire, and shared hope. People see their own needs, and they will often see the needs of their own people. But they will rarely, if ever, see the needs of peoples joined. This is a challenge that existed before the merchant, and it points to the work God has taken into God's self through the Son and in the Spirit in joining communities together in shared, interpenetrating mutual needs. There have always been two obstacles to the joining of needs. Obstacles exacerbated in the age of the merchant, the missionary, and the soldier. The first obstacle is the struggle of vulnerability. lodged in the secret and in the private. The struggle of vulnerability lodged in the secret and the private. We are vulnerable. This is what it means to be creatures. We are vulnerable, and this is not our sin. We are vulnerable and we are creatures, and this is good. This is of God. We are vulnerable and we are creatures, and God intends that we meet each other in our vulnerability and in our creatureliness at the body of Jesus in the Spirit. We meet in God's own life. We meet in God's own life at the sight of the creature. Yet in order for needs to be joined, vulnerabilities have to be shared and freed from the fear of exploitation or harm. Here, the work of drawing the line brings us to the most intimate work of joining and sharing, speaking and testifying together of our vulnerabilities and our hopes in God. We must find ways to bring people together to find their way to speaking out of the depths of their lives into the depths of one another. The ways that must be found must be literally on the ground, geographic ways, structured places that invite people into a new ecology of shared need discovery in shared places. Sadly, we have architecturally, geographically entered into an absolutely absurd concealing of our needs. We have formed habitation in destructive forms of the private, that is, in ways that teach us to deny what is in front of us. People in need, and denied any obligation that we have to the common geographic good. The first obstacle of joining need in the struggle of vulnerability is layered inside the second obstacle of breaking open our patterns of belonging, our racial, culture, gender, and class forms of belonging. We'll turn to this obstacle in the final lecture when we consider the circle, because this second obstacle is where the problem of the line meets the problem of the circle. So in this third lecture, I've invited us to consider how to draw lines that challenge the lines that constitute our lives, both internally and externally. Lines drawn for us historically by the interaction of three agents, the merchant, the missionary, and the soldier. These lines configure our visions of our homes, of property, of prisons, and of our safety, and of our nation, our borders, and our security. In order to do gospel work now, we must challenge the line, transgress the line by removing the line and remapping the line. Our sense of alliances must begin with the ground, the earth, real places, real spaces, and taking seriously our need for concrete connectivity with our specific environments and the people around us. That sense of alliance must grow through the joining of people in their needs across the boundaries that divide us. The psalmist captured the sentiment and sense that we must have as we think the line redemptively, when the psalmist said in Psalms 139, 7 through 12, and you know it so well, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast at the farthest limits of the sea. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. Oh. The divine presence knows no geographic or human boundaries. The psalmist reminds us that the geographic freedom of God is for us, reminding us of Emmanuel, that is God with us, always with us. A line runs from God to us, never broken, never compromised, always transgressing every line that seeks to border God, to fence in the divine. The freedom that God gives is the freedom that we must embody and the freedom that we must share by drawing new lines. And drawing new lines will also require that we learn to draw new circles. And to that we'll turn tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.